Hello guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to this amazing YouTube channel where we share various IT content to help us to improve our IT career. So if you're new here, karibu sana, you're definitely in the right place. And remember to kindly check on my previous videos. Please watch them if you haven't already. Please leave a like on each and every video. Also consider leaving a comment. Let me know what you think about those videos, and if there's anything you want me to talk about, also let me know in the comment section. Kindly also consider subscribing to this YouTube channel and help it to grow. So my name is Lona and I'm a container management engineer, and in this video today I want us to look at how to create an EKS cluster using EKSCTL. So there are different ways of creating an EKS cluster. You can create it from your console, but I want us to look at step by step on how to create it using EKSCTL. So on my display screen is my AWS console, and as you can see I don't have any EKS cluster so far. So I want us to go through together and see how we'll create that cluster to the end. So before you create an EKS cluster using EKSCTL, EKSCTL is a command line tool that you need to install. So it will depend on where you want to install that EKSCTL tool. So for me, I have an EC2 instance over here that I'm going to be running my commands from, but you can actually run your commands from maybe your local terminal or maybe a separate VM, for example, as long as you're able to access your AWS. So the only thing that you need is to install your AWS ELI tool and also configure your access and secret credentials. So once you're in your console, you know you're supposed to create an IAM user, and the IAM user will definitely have access and secret credentials. So once you install your AWS ELI tool, then you need to run AWS configure. It will prompt you for your access and the secret. And from that point, and you can also pass a region, and then from that point you should be able to access your AWS from that command, from that terminal. So for me, I'm using an EC2 instance because I didn't have a separate VM elsewhere, and I also didn't want to run them from my local machine. So here, once you have that, you've installed your AWS ELI and you've also configured your credentials, then you need to install a number of tools. One of the tools that you need to install is the EKSCTL itself. Remember, that is the command line tool that is going to help us to create our cluster, because you're going to run EKSCTL create cluster. You pass the name of the cluster, you pass the region and things like that. So you definitely have to install EKSCTL. Another thing you need to install is kubectl. So kubectl is also another command line tool that is used to interact with your Kubernetes cluster. So for those people who've been, managing Kubernetes clusters, you know that kubectl is that tool that interacts with the Kubernetes API server for you to run various activities within your Kubernetes cluster. For example, when you want to create a deployment, you definitely have to run kubectl create deployment. You want to check nodes, kubectl get nodes. So it's that important tool. Something else you also need to install is AWS IAM Authenticator. So once you create your Kubernetes cluster, you need to be able to interact with the cluster from the command line that you're working from. For example, now for me, from this instance, so I need to install AWS IAM Authenticator to enable me to configure my kubeconfig file and to be able to use kubectl to interact with the Kubernetes cluster. So for all those things that you need to install, apart from AWS ELI and how to configure your credentials, I have these guides from AWS. And something really good about AWS is that you can never go wrong with their guides. They are very straightforward, really nice. So I'm going to leave them in my description box so that it becomes easier for you instead of you going to search for them. So this one for installing kubectl, and then this other one for installing EKSCTL, and then this one for installing AWS IAM Authenticator. So I'm going to leave them in that description box, and I hope that they'll help you to easily get the information that you want. So in my EC2 instance here, I have all of those. I can show you. I have kubectl already. Sorry about that. You can see I also have EKSCTL. You can see, and I've also installed AWS IAM Authenticator. So kindly use these guides to help you to install kubectl, install EKSCTL, and install AWS IAM Authenticator. That is if you've already installed AWS ELI, assuming that you're running it from a separate VM and you've also configured your credentials. So you can go ahead and do that. And another important thing in terms of preparation to install your EKS cluster is to have a VPC. Remember, all components of AWS run within a VPC, and you need to have a VPC dedicated for your Kubernetes cluster. So we are going to create a VPC with you. And there's also another very nice guide on how to create a VPC using CloudFormation templates, which are already provided by AWS. So you don't have to go and do it manually. I'll also leave this link for you to be able to create a VPC very easily using CloudFormation and using the templates that have been provided by AWS. So you just have to go to your console, search for CloudFormation, over here. You click on create stack, and then you come and paste the URL for the template, which are usually stored in S3. So it depends if you want to just have IP version 4 or both IP version 4 and IP version 6. So for me, let me just, because this is a demo, let's do IP version 4 only. So come and paste your URL there, and then you click next. And then you give it a name. I'm going to call it EKS VPC. And then you can also change the CIDR blocks that you want for the VPC and also for the subnets. And the good thing about using this template is that you'll already been, provided with the number of subnets. Because remember, for a Kubernetes cluster, EKS cluster in AWS, there are requirements for the VPC and the subnets that you need to have. So the reason why I like using these templates is already because, it will definitely create the subnets for you and also suggest some CIDR blocks that you can use. So I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to click next. And then I'm not going to add anything over here, not have nothing. Let me just say next and review and submit. So your VPC is going to be created within a few seconds. So this is creation in progress. So you can go back and check VPC. Your VPC, so it's already here created, and also you can also check on the subnets that were created, and as you can see they're here. Subnet 201, 01, I don't know why it's called 01 twice, and 02 twice. It's okay. Oh yeah, I did. Oh, I get it. I did the one for. Let's go back here and check what I did. So I did one for enabling both public and private subnets. I need to do for only private subnets instead. So okay, you can choose to use any. So you can say for public and private subnets, or maybe for public subnets only, or for private subnets only. So it's always recommended to use private subnets, but remember, your worker nodes will at some point need to access the internet. So I usually just do private subnets and then make sure that I enable subnets to assign public IPs. So you can go either way. So for me, let's see what we have over here. We have one for private and another one here for private, and then some for some. Okay, what we can do is that we can place our cluster in the private subnets, and then our worker nodes, we can at least have them to have the public subnets. So let's just use this one. So once we have our VPC up and running, and you can confirm that you have your subnets, go ahead and create your VPC cluster. So remember, wherever you'll be running your commands from, make sure that you have installed what I've already talked about. You have your kubectl, you have your EKSCTL, and you have your AWS IAM Authenticator, and you've already also installed your AWS CLI and configured your credentials. So I have everything over here. Let's just go ahead and run our EKSCTL create cluster to create our cluster. So I have the command over here. What I'm going to do is to change the subnets, because this is a command that I was using before. So let's go back and get the private subnet ID, this one. And replace it here. And the other one as well, because we need at least two. Let's get another private subnet for our control plane. So control copy, and let's replace it over here. Control V. And then you need to pass the name of your cluster. So let's just keep it at my cluster. Also the region, for me it's US East 1. and then the version. So depending on the version that you want to install, please make sure that you make the changes accordingly. So let's run this command to create our cluster. So the reason why I'm saying here without Nodegroup, you can actually say with Nodegroup, but the reason why I'm saying without Nodegroup is that I don't want my Nodegroup to be created with the control plane, because I would probably want to make some changes for the EC2s that I'm going to use for the Nodegroup. So let's just do the the control plane first, and then you can add our node group later. So copy this, come to your terminal and run the command to create your cluster. So our cluster is in the process of creating, so let's give it a few minutes. Sometimes it can take like a few minutes, but let's be patient and enable it to give it time to create. So as you can see, it's quite easy. You don't really need to do much. Make sure that you prepare your work environment as needed. Install your AWS CLI tool, configure your credentials for you to be able to reach your AWS console. Install the required tools, which is kubectl, EKSCTL, and AWS IAM Authenticator, and from there, configure your VPC. Make sure that it has the subnets that are required. They're actually the requirements needed by AWS. So if you come to this guide, you should be able to read Amazon EKS VPC and subnet requirements and considerations. So this should work for you. And then from there you create your VPC. So once you have your VPC up and running, another thing you need is you need roles. You need an EKS Amazon EKS service role. So when you're using EKS to create your cluster, it will automatically create that role for you, so you don't have to go creating the role manually. But when you're installing EKS using the console, you'll definitely have to create that role separately. So for this one, that will be created for you, and I'll show you once the cluster is up. And there's also another role that will be needed when you'll be adding your node group. So I have the guide also here. All these guides, I'm going to leave them in my description box so that it's easy for you to follow. This is Amazon EKS node IAM role. So when you be adding your node group, this is the role that is needed. You can come and read about it, and then go ahead and create that role. Otherwise, you won't be able to add your node group. But I'll show you that. And then this one for creating kubectl, EKSCTL, and AWS IAM Authenticator. I'm going to leave all of them in the description box. So let's go back and check on our cluster. It's still creating, so I think I'll just fast forward and continue once we have our cluster created. Yes, so our cluster is done. So already created, so let's go back and check on it. You go back to your console and search for EKS. You should be able to see your cluster, but without the nodes, the worker nodes. What am I typing? EKS. So let's check on it. And here it is. So if you click on it, you can see information about it. It's version 1.26. I said you can install any version that you need. And when you go down to compute, you can see you don't have any worker node. So we are going to add our node group over here. Click on add node group, give it a name. So you can say my cluster node group. Give it a name like that. And then this is the role I was talking about. So when you don't have this role, make sure that you create using this guide which I showed you, because you won't be able to proceed without having this role. And you can read what the role is about. It's actually really important that you have it for your node groups for you to be able to run your EKS cluster. And you can add any other thing that you want. If you want to add a label to the nodes, if you want to change any node for any reason, you want to add a tag, but for me, I don't want to do any of this. This is just a demo. So let's go next. And this is where you choose the type of, what you want for your EC2, the worker nodes. So this is where you choose the AMI type, the capacity type, and then you select the instance type, and also the disk size for your EBS volumes, and then the desired number, the maximum number, and the minimum number of nodes, and also during an update, how much nodes do you want to have up and running so that you don't have like a total outage. So these are some of the things I need to change. So this is why I was saying I didn't want to pass with Nodegroup, because when you want to do changes for your EC2 workouts, this is where you make the changes from. So once you're satisfied with everything here, click next, and then also choose the subnet. So I'm going to choose the subnets that have the public IPs. So let me go back to VPC. On the subnets. So one that has public, this one ending with C6, and this one ending with E4. So I want to use these ones instead of the private ones. E4 and C6. So let's go back. This one and this one, these two. Yeah. Then you click next, you review, and then you click create. So your node group is going to be created with the specifications that you've provided. So if you go back to your clusters, then the EKS cluster, compute, you can see your node group here is creating. Still creating, so let's give it a few minutes. Still creating. Yes, it's done, and you can see our node group is now active. So our EKS cluster is now up and running. And yeah, that's basically how to create an EKS cluster using EKSCTL. So back on our instance, you can actually check and interact with our cluster using kubectl. So once you have your AWS IAM Authenticator installed, you also need to configure kubeconfig, and then from there you'll be able to run or interact with the cluster using kubectl. So there's this guide here, creating or updating a kubeconfig file for Amazon EKS cluster. So let's do that. So I'm going to copy this command and modify it here. So my region is EU, US Eastern. So copy that, paste it here, Control V, and then my cluster name is just my cluster. So let's run this to configure a kubeconfig file. Paste. So as you can see, we've updated our kubeconfig file. So yay, we have our EKS cluster up and running, and we can interact with it with kubectl. So let's get our nodes, kubectl, get nodes. And as you can see, these are our worker nodes. And that's it, our cluster is ready, and you can start running your workloads from there. So if you have any question, let me know in the comment section, and kindly consider commenting. Let me know what you think. Give the video a thumbs up if it's helpful to you. Give it a thumbs up, and also consider sharing. I know that so many people would want to use such a guide, and easy guide to install the EKS clusters. Kindly also consider sharing the video as much as you can, and please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye.